we can begin immediately. No
Okay.
problem.
Okay.
Just allow me to start recording and then.
दुबे सर, आप अनम्यूट करके टॉक चालू कर रहे हैं सर. दुबे सर.
Okay.
Okay, right sir.
Okay, thank you. May I request everybody else to please mute yourself except I and Mr. Murali Menon. The rest of us, please mute yourself. Okay, so good morning, friends. Pleasure to be back this Sunday morning again. I want to welcome all the participants. We have a new speaker this morning, Mr. Murali Menon. I'll briefly introduce him. Murali Menon is a facilitator and presently a team member at the Study Center of Valley School, Krishnamurti Foundation, India. Murali has worked with 3 Krishnamurti schools, basically Sayadri, Rajghat Patient School, and presently the Valley School. So he is familiar with the KFI culture and deeply interested in case teachings. Before coming to the Valley School, Murali was associated with 2 multinational corporations in the field of marketing and training for 14 years. And for 2 decades, he has been a teacher, a house parent, and a coordinator at the Valley School. With these words, I once again welcome Mr. Murali Menon to this forum. And Murali, the format is that you can speak for as long as you want, maybe perhaps anywhere between 40 to 60 minutes. After that, if somebody wants to make an observation, they can do it. Otherwise, we switch to question answers. And this is a 90-minute program. We normally close by 12:30. So this will be the format. So I welcome you once again to the study circle Indore. And may I request to begin your speech. Murali is going to talk about dying is living. Yes, Murali, please.
Thank you so much, Dubeji, and all my friends. Many of them I know. I have been, meeting them. But now I'm in Valley. I'm not able to see you physically, but it is a pleasure to see that all of you are here. Wonderful. I would like to state that I'm not a speaker, but when I came to study center, I started interacting with the guests, and usually we have lots of dialogues in Valley School Study Center. But knowing that this is the format indoor study circle suggests, I thought I will attempt, and I would like to start with reading K. Quote begins, living is dying and dying is living. And one has to understand this, not theoretically, not quote the speaker as though one has understood him. We must together go into it. Quote ends. I hope I am audible to all of you.
Yes, you are. Yes.
Okay. So when I just saw a quote of this kind, I was curious because this kind of a quote we don't hear in our family circle, society, schools or colleges, or any of our workspaces. I feel that this is related to religious living. When I really look at the population, at least statistically, about 80 to 90%, and in India it is almost 98%, people are religious. So I really wonder, what does that mean? So that is the basis I'm going to really explore this today. I begin and share my thoughts for about 30 to 40 minutes. I'll be very happy to have you all joining the exploration later. I would like to look at my living, my journey so far, and my understanding in relation to the topic. And I feel that it is similar to your living too. So, what is these two words, living and dying? Is it possible to look afresh? What do we call living to start with? Is it the existence as it is? Is it all the activities between birth and death? Is living a routine? What we do every day, day after day? So, what is this activities routine from birth? To be authentic, I would like to start from myself. So I'm just going to recall how I lived, or rather what I call life, living. As a child, I was introduced to the story of Ramayana, even before I learned reading or writing. This story was my first introduction to a part of the religion practiced by adults in our family. There was a temple in the home and few more in the society where we lived. I was also slowly introduced to many activities as part of our daily living. At around 5 years, I was introduced to another space called school. As I joined a nearby school, it was a different space. It was very evident that it is not like home or a temple. I was introduced to many more people, adults and children. Some of them were friendly and some were not. I don't know why some people were kind to me or why some people were unkind. I always wanted to avoid hurt because the feeling is very painful within. I learned to avoid those who were not friendly to me. Even my parents advised so. Now I see that isolating and avoiding is taught at a very early age. Why are we educated this way? That's a question which always comes to me. I feel that this process of growing up is not just for me, it's for all of us. As a teenager, I was attracted to science and the technology. The experiments, the magic of predictable results, and the pleasure of its application, particularly. I felt that one must have physical joy and comfort in living. And I also felt that with technology and science, it is absolutely scientifically possible for all human beings to have it. But I did not see that happening around when I was a child, also when I was an adult. I think that it is not the fault of science. It is something else. I wondered what that could be. I couldn't really figure it out at that point of time. I saw that each one is striving hard to reach ultimately something or other. And this is the popular approach to life. And that kind of living did not sound logical to me. I feel that the true drives I had as a child, as a teenager, was attraction and repulsion. And this gave me enormous energy. Let me give an example. As I saw my elders in the society riding on motorbikes, I was instantly attracted to them. And as I grew up, I did buy a new bike. This energy came from my attraction towards bikes after a long, long time. And if I may say, what do I mean by repulsion and that energy behind? I saw my father smoking, rather a chain smoker sometimes. I did not like him smoking, and I don't know why. As a teen, I learned that smoking is not good and never wanted to smoke. I think this is the energy which I was talking about when you are repelling about something that gives you some kind of energy. I feel that this kind of energy is behind everyone's living. I will be surprised if somebody say, no, I don't have that energy. And why I mentioned this energy? Because I wanted to go a little more into it. I feel that this energy, the energy from an attraction or energy from a repulsion, gives a sense of strong right and wrong. And one can be very harsh to another who feels otherwise. One may also start generalizing people based on this. So it is some, kind of intervening energy, interfering energy, if I may say. One may also start generalizing based on this interference. For example, if I see a person smoking, I feel that that person is bad because smoking is bad. This was in me very much as a child. But I did not feel something wrong with that. And nobody in the school corrected me. Actually, they appreciated, having such strong views and having such kind of energy, something which they considered as positive. So I wonder, is that so for all of you too? People grow up and get married, get a job, lead a comfortable life, if one is lucky. If you are not lucky, no one cares for you. If one is not lucky, one may feel rejected and may turn to drinks or drugs. I saw so many of my friends getting lost in that way. But everyone continues to compete, struggle to achieve in this economic world when they are growing up. And that starts too early, even in schools and colleges. All are too busy with this kind of a living. Now, I always wondered, is this the way to have a physical joy and comfort for all human beings? Why people don't care for each other? Why they are just left? Why they are labeled? Why they are, pulled down? I don't know. I'm talking about, when I was a child, and I don't see any difference even now. And as I grew up and became an adult, I read something very, very logical. And that was pointing to something beyond this kind of living at that point of time. It suggested that we need to see around, and then we see that it is all the superficial aspects of religion. And that is influencing people and from a very young age. And one should not stop with that. One should learn more about religion, go deeper into it. And it was so convincing the way it was put forward. So I started exploring, meeting people, and going to places wherever I felt something is religious. I quickly found that living, whether it is in a religious space or in society or in homes, is a battle. And people turn towards the popular versions of religions due to many reasons. Need not be for the same reasons I was interested. I don't know much about many other religions. I've just read a little bit here and there. But my growing up and my exposure to the religion which my family and society was practicing, I was interested to read more, to understand more. And my understanding is limited again, what I heard, read as a youth mostly. I was fascinated by a wonderful epic called Mahabharata. It's a beautiful story, and there are many, many versions of it. And I find that it is there in all regional languages in different versions. But I heard and understood that the original version was in Sanskrit. And it is interesting, the living was a battle, and it is clearly depicted from the royal family of Kauravas and Pandavas. And their battle was extended to a lot more kingdoms. And actually, when I read, I was just trying to understand what is this story conveying. My understanding is that the Lord Krishna leads almost the entire generation of people to war, as there was no other way out. It was so convincingly picturized. It's sad. Now, my question remains, is this the way to give joy and comfort to all human beings? I met a lot of people, a lot of friends, for and against this way of living. Some of them were really feeling that one need to fight, one need to really kill if necessary. I don't know. The author of this epic, Mahabharata original, Ved Vyas, I was told, became very sad and wrote another book, Bhagavat, says some of my scholar friends. My understanding is that Bhagavat is full of stories with a lot of pointers to a different way of living. And also, of course, preparing one to die without any fear. Actually, it is a continuation of Mahabharata. You have some of the characters. The great-grandchild of Pandavas, he's waiting to die. He was told that he's going to die in 7 days, and the story begins. And so many stories interwoven in that. But all that, just stories. Very profound words in between. Very powerful message communicated in between. But as I explored, all the popular versions of religious texts are from Vedas. The root of all that was Vedas. Whether it is in Sanskrit, Hindi, or any other regional language in India. That's what I have understood. Vedas and Upanishads are our ancient heritage. I have seen few people from all over the world attracted to them. Sometime I really felt so great about these teachings. But always I had this question. If that is so, why this is not part of our living, our day-to-day living? Why is it that most of us have not even heard of them? You know, when I started understanding about Upanishads, Vedas, Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavat, many of my family members had no clue. And many of my friends have not even heard any of it, and neither they are interested, even a word of it. And when the television serials came, because even this influence in television, many people know, oh, I know Ramayana, I know Mahabharata. That's it. They don't have anything much more to say about it. I feel that we should not attempt to dilute the truth. In today's context, in this talks context, the truth of living and dying. What is portrayed in Mahabharata and Bhagavat is something very different. I felt it is, made more understandable by dilution. Profound insights, maybe, needs to be understood by going into it. But many say that it is difficult and are very satisfied with a diluted or convenient modified versions. And such dilutions become very popular among the public. But I don't think they have any understanding about it. When people say that I understand, I really don't know. They haven't even read a little bit of it. They haven't given time to it. They just know the story. They just have some, viewpoint. They have just an agreement. And they say that they understood. Such ideas are influencing the entire humanity. I see that in the locality where I have grown up, and even the very scholarly people quoting, talking about it, with great feeling that they have understood it. I don't know, maybe they have understood it. I did not get a feeling when they said that. But they are influencing. They are influencing deeply. And they do come out in all kinds of expressions. I remember lots of songs written by poets, lots of lyrics written in film songs or popular bands. They're all influenced by, these profound words or wisdom of words. But are these merely superficial ideas and words? Are they ever penetrating into the lives? Are they penetrating to the culture? Or they are just superficial? This question I had always. Aren't we seeing that all around us? Little practices or personalities become the religion according to our likes and taste. Sometimes I feel that you haven't really gone into what all other ideas these texts are saying just by seeing one simple technique, one simple idea. You just consider that is a God-man, or that is something wonderful, or that is going to help your life. I think how gullible all of us are, whether we are educated or not educated. Why? What is the reason for it? I really wonder. This I could see because I was really exploring it with some of my great friends who were also equally interested in reading and discussing. But I really wonder how we are so caught up with little superficial, modified English versions of it. How people all over the world fall for it. And they just believe that this is going to help them understand living. Is following something or somebody living? Having said all this, I should really admit there are few wonderful friends dedicated their lives to such scriptural teaching in depth. They did not join organizations. They did not really work to earn a livelihood. They even, some of them, did not send children to schools. They wanted to really help the children to grow up, understand what they felt as profound teachings. They are following a traditional way of living and encouraging their children also to follow that way. They are simple and exploring this ancient text very seriously, and they do meet occasionally. I have great reverence for such friends. So it is, after all, left to individuals whether you would like to do this or that with your life. After all, it is your living. So I have that great reverence to such friends who are following, very seriously. I should really say that I'm not condemning, I'm not criticizing, or I'm not admiring anybody when I'm saying this. But I'm just sharing my own so-called religious journey in this context of living and dying. But I remember reading K, and especially when he is pointing something about truth. So let me quote. The quote begins, "Truth is meant for all, but if you really feel that truth is meant for all, though it may take time to be understood, and time is not of a great importance, if you feel impelled to give off your understanding to everyone, then you will not narrow down the truth. Truth does not belong to the select any more than it belongs to the multitude." Quote ends. Now I'm really asking, is Mahabharata a story about living? Because it is talking so much about, dharma. And what was finally achieved? What happened to all of them? Destruction? Killing? For dharma? I don't know. Is that for living? And is Bhagavat a story about dying? Dying rightly? When somebody died in homes, people read Bhagavat. That is a ritual. And there are Bhagavat made popular. So many people gather, not due to death, but as a scriptural understanding. So somebody will be reading, somebody will be celebrating in between, there'll be food, provided, and it is done between morning sunrise to sunset for 7 days or 9 days. So I really wonder, do people understand living and dying because they are reading or listening to Bhagavad? It's my, earnest question. I'm just sharing. I'm not really saying they are not understanding or they are understanding. Now, reading K, this question naturally comes. Is that the truth did not come out through these epics or Puranas, But I really don't say that you should not read. If you have time, if you have interest, there are so much literature. Vedas, Upanishads, epics, and 18 Puranas, they're all considered as Upangas of Vedas. And each region, each regional language has many, many, many versions of it. And it is such a joy, it's a treat for people who are interested in language and people who are interested in interpretations to really read, listen to all this literature. But will that reveal the truth? Now, I have attended many, many rituals associated with death. As a teenager, I was asked to represent on our behalf of family in many such cases. So we go to every homes for all celebrations and one of our family members represent. Same in the case of death. I have seen so closely what all happened after death. I have witnessed the great sorrow and even felt a kind of emptiness while in the cremation ground often. But as I came out, I forgot all that. Now, it is not for all people who die. With some people you feel, with some people you don't feel anything. What is death to us? Aren't we really scared of death, afraid of death? Why? Do we ever ask this question? Is our upbringing ever facilitating such a question to be asked or to be discussed? Isn't it a great sorrow associated with certain deaths? And you really don't want to, talk about death. Aren't we avoiding because death is considered inauspicious? Now, what is our understanding of death? How do we really look at it? Because today's topic is that. Is death same for all? It looks like everybody dies, whether you are young, old, rich, or poor. But do we treat it that way? We don't want young to die, and we want old to die. Why? Why do we treat it like that? We want to celebrate and actually go and then say, if it is an old person died, why are we really, differentiating? What is our understanding about death? Aren't we really biased? Religions always, had their rituals point us to believe a life after death. I have seen that people always wanted to have a son, to do the rituals after death so that they will be liberated or they get a better life. And many want, of course, a better life next. So what is this, understanding of death and this present life? Is that the reason for these rituals and actions after death? Many people, believe that when they are in their deathbed, if they have good thoughts, they are liberated. Or if they remember God, they are liberated. That is why actually the entire population name their children after a god or goddesses or something nice. At least they remember their children when they are dying. It's just a hope. It's just a belief. But we practice this without knowing anything about it, without understanding anything about it. Now, whatever said and done, the fear of death, fear of one's own death, fear of our dear and dear is most common. But nobody seems to be helping in the fear of this death. And if people say that no, they are modern, very small population, or the so-called religious people, the modern way of living is exploiting this human fear. I don't think they are doing anything to alleviate this fear. Is it possible to look at death differently? When I read K, when I really joined K Foundations, worked in 3 different spaces, I really met few wonderful people who are not bothered about death. They are clear that after a certain age, one should not be really bothered about death. One should be ready to die. And these are pious, austere, and affectionate people, probably who have discovered slowing down thoughts and drives of living. One can see a different approach in their way of living. But I still want to ask this question. Is that living? Is that all about living? Or is living and dying to be explored within oneself, to be extremely authentic about what is happening? Not to say to people, but actually to observe, to see what do we call living and what do we call dying. Is it possible to live that way with a lot of authenticity for oneself? It is not for someone else. To be first-hand, watching inwardly, moment to moment, and even watching our actions. I see that an activity of thought is born and it is bound to end. What will be that kind of living? Where there is birth and death happening all the time. Is that a right question to ask in this group? When I read meditation, tapas, I was really fascinated. I just would like to recite one line from an Upanishad, which is very popular. This is chanted very religiously when you invite, when you welcome a wise man or welcome a saintly person. So the quote begins. It's in Sanskrit. Na karmana na prajaya dhanena tyage naike amrtatva manashu. The quote ends. It is saying, neither by actions nor by progeny and wealth, but by renunciation alone is immortality attained. Now, what do we understand by these words? People very religiously chant, very few of them. Majority of the people have no idea about even this chant. Now, what is this tyaga? What is this renunciation? I think most popularly it is understood, if you are not married, if you are a monk, that is the greatest tyaga. And that is why it is chanted to welcome such people. So again, it is, pointing to an outward action. But the very words say action has very little meaning. So it is not about action. Then is there an enunciation about inward living? Is there an immortality associated with this? It's very interesting to really, talk about it, but let us not really go too much into it. When I read K, and even today's quote, dying is living. What is the truth of our living and dying? I think K is pointing out in an entirely different way. I think he is having very profound, statements. He seems to be suggesting, if you merely escape from it, run away, rationalize, then the sorrow is your shadow. But with the ending of that, there is passion. That is the very essence of energy. But very few of us have that passion, which is living. That passion which moves the universe. Quote ends. Now, this is something from as latest as 1983. So from 1930s to 1980s, K talked about death. K talked about ending. K talked about living. Very differently from all the religious texts, from all the religious people. All those words may be very interesting, fascinating, because they are all beautiful words. But in living, is it manifesting? Is it living, someone else living, or my family is living, or my own living? Is it happening? Is it really possible to die? Die to everyday incidents and experiences and memory, whether they are pleasurable or painful. Is that a new beginning? Surely it seems like the only way to all the conflicts in relationship, to live fully, completely, day after day. Is that also actually a new way of living? Is that also to contact a different kind of energy, which is not what we have found, an attraction and repulsion and the energy after it? Isn't it all our life, energy? Are we really wasting that day after day because we are not living rightly, because we are losing a major chunk of it and we are tired at the end of it? Is it possible to die to yesterday? Is it possible to die to everybody whom I have kept so dear or whom I have kept not so dear within? Is it possible to die to oneself? I think these are something very, very interesting questions which K asked us to reflect every time when we meet as friends. So let me pause and let us explore whether this is really inevitable for all of us and whether it is really possible for us today, now. Thank you all.
Thank you, Murli. I think it's very well placed, very well explained. I request people, if they have questions to ask, Murli, please raise your hands. Dinesh, yes. Dinesh Wagmare has a question. Please unmute yourself. Unmute.
Good morning, Mr. Murli. I wonder what I have listened to you, and I really wonder what is the essence of your talk, because as far as my understanding goes, the Mahabharata is about the life, how the life poses challenges to you. Bhagavad is about the Sri Krishna Tattva, which is the God element, and Gita is the way showing in the Mahabharata, in the situation of Mahabharata or life situation. And what JK has said, that dying to the last memory or the past memory. But how you are making the coordination in this, means what is your message in fact? Can you please explain in detail or elaborate on this?
Thank you so much, sir. Actually, I love to, interact, because that is something amazing.
Yeah.
So when you ask this question, I think, let me just briefly say, I think when K say dying is living, it looks like it is a religious question to me. Now, what we understand as religion is Mahabharata, Bhagavad, and all the little bit superficial things which we do around, or some so-called God man or wise man advising you do this, do that. That is religion. But K is not talking that as religion. Now let me just say one line. When you live in the past, as most people do, you are wasting an enormous amount of your own energy, because you need all your energy, which is the essence of religion. This is from K. And what have we made with religion? What do we call as religion? Is there any energy with that kind of a religious practice, religion, in our daily living? So is it possible to really look at what K is suggesting? It's all about our daily living. It's all about immense energy. And are we aware that we are wasting it because we are simply superficial in religious thing, which is not religion at all, because there is no energy at the end of it, even to look at this question. We are confused whether I should follow this guru, whether I should follow this text, whether I should do Vaikunta Ekadashi today, whether I should go to some other, new modern teaching. What will happen? Now K is gone. Whom should I follow? This is the confusion. And this is more than 90% of population. And many of them are completely indifferent. They are not even asking whether there is any energy in religion. And religions have become a banned word. I think in America and Europe, around 20% or more than 20% people are there saying that we are not religious. Soon we will also follow, because we are just following. We followed Bhagavad, we followed Mahabharata, we followed all the so-called saints, and we are following what others are saying. We are just waiting. So, is there a living which is truly religious, where there is tremendous energy to be watchful, to be attentive to oneself, to the people around, to the work one is, engaged with from morning till evening? So this is what I had in mind. Did I confuse you more, sir, or did I explain?
No, what I think, you said that 90% people are confused. This is their problem. Basically, tradition is very clear. Tradition has explained everything in detail, and then they have clearly told that you go to a particular guru. JK is also doing the same thing. JK is saying that you forget the past. Krishna has also said to Arjuna that you forget the past, that these are all your relatives and all that. See the fact and act accordingly. That action he has explained in Gita. So I think things are very clear. As far as I am, this is what my perception is. What you have to say?
I'm so glad that you are talking about it, sir. Actually, Kay talks about it in a very different way. He is not suggesting anything. He is just saying, are we observing as we are talking to each other? Because he says, it seems, there are three ways to observe. One is you observe what all happened in your past, like I did in the beginning, that from your childhood, what all happened. Now there is another observation he seems to be suggesting. Okay, what I will do in future, what I will do tomorrow, what I am going to do next year, what I am going to do in the next life. That is another kind of observation. Now, third thing he is suggesting, can I just listen to you when you are saying something? Can I really listen to the kind of thoughts which is arising in me as I am listening to you? And Kay always, asked people when he was giving a talk, will you please do it as I am talking? He is not saying anything. He is saying, don't get lost in the other kind of observation that is about past or about future. And he makes it so beautifully. He is saying, you observe yourself as you are. That is, what you are actually thinking, what you are actually feeling, and what you are doing in the present. In that observation, there is no need for the past to interfere. Now, if you really ask, our past interfere many a times because we have not died to the past. And we call that as living. So Kay is questioning, is that living at all? This is my understanding, sir. Did I make things clear? Or would you like to open it up more?
I think others should also, I should give time to others to ask their question. But anyway, I would like to make a comment that my understanding about Kay is he's trying to say that you understand your I, the structure of I, and you get rid of it as soon as possible. About the past, you can take it as a reference, but you see the fact, you understand the structure of I, and I should not interfere in all your present living. That is what my understanding is.
I think that's beautifully said. Actually, Kay is challenging. Somebody said, sir, isn't it letting go? Then he said, what will you let go? You are too scared to let go yourself, your attachment. So Kay is not suggesting anything. Kay is saying, do it, sir, now. He is saying something not as words. And I don't think, sir, any other teacher had, directly spoken like this. But thank you so much for opening it up more.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. I think, Hansa, you had a question? Wanted to ask something? Please unmute yourself. Mr. Kadu?
No, sir. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm just.
Okay. Chidananji wants to ask a question. Please, sir, unmute yourself. Unmute.
Yes, sir. My question is, when I say this is what K said, or this is what Upanishad say, this is what the Vedas say, can I see that I'm making an authority of them, sir? K said, don't make me an authority. When he's speaking, he says, don't listen to me. He says, I'm acting as a mirror. Is it very difficult to understand when he says he's acting as a mirror, that it is not him, but it is my own thoughts? That is what I'm saying. I'm not making an authority of anyone else. The moment I make authority, however good it may be very profound, what they have spoken 5,000 years back. The moment I mention, I'm back to my conditioning. Can I observe that is the question, sir?
Anand, thank you so much for bringing that question. Actually, when I was mentioning about my own exploration into religious understanding, I saw a huge ashram where more than 100 saints are photographed and kept all around. And to my surprise, K was there. So people are already doing it. People are actually considering K as a saint. Now, K is not talking about it. K is actually suggesting you are important. Right now, this moment is important. How do you talk? Are you talking from all the information? Are you making that as an authority? Are you attracted and having an energy when you speak about such people? Are you really belittling some other teachers and feeling rejected about them? All these are an observable fact now. Now, K had given such a kind of freedom that it is up to you. If you would like to really observe, if you really would like to, see the seriousness of it or see the truth of what is being said, it's about living. It is not about K. It is not about another guru. It is not about a scripture. It is about living now, not about yesterday, not about tomorrow. Now, we are not taught in this way in any of our, educations, whether it is in our family, schools, colleges, or in our, training, corporate trainings, whatever we go through. So we claim that no, we are rich, we are knowledgeable, and we are living, and we are acting. But K seems to be pointing it out that this observation now, as I am talking to you, listening to you, is the real action. So no scope to make K an authority. But thank you so much for asking that question.
I have one more question, sir. Like, to live, I have to die. So how do I understand this? I don't think, it is about the dying of the physical organism.
Yeah.
Okay. It is the me. I'm terrorized to end that me, and which I'm again protecting every second. Every other religion they said that me, the self, is that. But here is the person who is coming. The me is your memory, your past, your conditioning and things, the content of consciousness, which I'm not willing to empty that or throw it aside. So as long as it is there, I cannot live. So I think every religion, when they spoke about death, is something else. They spoke about reincarnation. He says, why can't you reincarnate now? And what is that is going to reincarnate in your next life? So it seems to be extremely difficult for us. Somehow the me is always there. I may speak, all kinds of profound things, but I'm not willing to end that because I'm attached to it. I'm attached to my family, attached to my son, attached to the wealth, my power, my position, which is the me. Do you observe that is a question, sir?
So nice of you to raise that another very important question. When I talk about my attachment to my son, my family, we are moving away from the observation of the present. We are going into the past. And of course, that is required, that is valid. But Kay is not talking about, death, the way all the religions have made that into. Kay is saying, when you have your son, or when you have somebody very closely related to you die suddenly, you are really heartbroken, you are really shattered. Have you ever inquired why? Because this you see happening every day. And it is happening only to the close people. And when you really see, it is some images which you have created. It is some pleasurable events. It is a kind of dependence which you have created within you unknowingly. And nobody in the society, nobody from the religions, nobody from educated, teachers helped us to see this fact. And we all suffer. And actually it is so interesting to, say this grief, loneliness, sense of separation, which is essentially time, identification, investment, and all the things one has cultivated in another. All that ends, and there is a shock. And that shock I call sorrow. And that is why I'm afraid of people close to me dying. That is why I'm afraid of ending myself. It has nothing to do with the physical organism. Physical organism, whether you like it or not, it is going to die. Whether it is due to COVID-19 or cancer, that doesn't matter. But it's going to end. Whether you are young or old, it's going to happen. So what is this he's suggesting, which is so observable? I'm so attached to somebody and I suffer, and that sorrow is so much in me. But we have never learned that this ending of this is essential to live. What does that mean? That's a question. Let us go into it.
So somebody close to me dies. Let's take my father dies. Is it I am in sorrow because I love him, or I missed him because I was depending on him and he gave me some amount of pleasure. He gave me some confidence. So therefore, that sorrow, not because he has died. Can I look at that as a question, sir?
Absolutely. What you're saying is so true. But no religion talks about it. Your MA, BA, MBA doesn't make you realize this fact. But we feel we are educated. We feel we are religious. But we still weep and we are completely indifferent to another person dying or killing any other living things. And we call that we have understood, we are religious, we know what is living. What a tragedy. What are we really learning? What is it religions, the so-called teachings, teaching? But thank you so much.
Thank you, Murli. I think we have Clemis. She wants to ask something. Yes, Clemis, go ahead.
Yeah, first of all, thank you for your talk. It was really interesting, and the question and answers also, same way, very interesting. And I just wanted to make a point that, see, when we say, like Sachidanand said that when we say Mahabharata said this, Krishnamurti said this, like that, but he said, don't make me into an authority. Are we also not making him into authority when we say he said, don't make me in an authority? So that, because the thing is very subtle, you know, we very easily do that. And we don't see it. I am just trying to think over it, you know, because it is so easy for us to fall into these traps, you know. So the whole thing is to understand authority, what is involved in it, you know. Why do we follow? What makes us follow? So some time back, you were answering somebody and you said, oh, now K is not there, and whom do I follow? Some people are asking this question or asked this question at some point. See, the people who were following Krishnamurti were the people who did not understand him at all. Because, in fact, there is nothing to follow. The whole thing, he's talking about understanding, he's talking about awakening. Because we are in a deep sleep. You know, and this deep sleep has come about mainly because of following. Because we jump from one following to another following, and we don't really see what we are doing, what is involved in following. You know, the people who follow, they follow because they are lost. That is obvious. And you will not find your own way by following another person. So the whole thing is about understanding and awakening our own understanding, you know. That does not mean that we should now negate everything and reject everybody. I don't think so. I think anything can help if we are open, if we can read between the lines. And I feel that Krishnamurti was trying to say that, you know, we have been reading Bhagavad Gita for thousands of years, and we have not understood because of this attitude of following. The mind is not awakened. So he was just pointing out this fact, awake, you know, see what you are doing. So the whole thing is that. So my question is, when we talk about Krishnamurti's teachings and we go into them, do you feel that there is space for further following, or do you feel that it is hard? I know, because we are so used to this whole process, you know, and that is everybody. But do you feel that there is a possibility for us to really understand ourselves and go into ourselves with the help of the teachings, instead of trying to understand Krishnamurti? Because my feeling is there is nothing to understand about Krishnamurti. The whole thing is pointing to ourselves. So that was what I wanted to.
Well, thank you so much. You know, you brought another very important point. I think Krishnaji said sometime, I have only one thing to say. See how you are thinking. See how you are behaving. it is simply following somebody or something. It's imitation. You are second-hand people. So he is saying, this is what the culture had done. This is what all the religions have done. This is what all the teachers have done. So he is suggesting, break free. And the moment you listen to him, you're already freed when you are listening to him at that point of time. Now, can we lead a living, day-to-day living? Forget about Krishnamurti, forget about, A, B, C, D, whomsoever. If I have to really listen in the present, maybe to my children, maybe to my neighbor, maybe to my spouse, we need to be without thinking something else. Children catch us immediately saying that you're not listening to me because they're very, very observant. Now, why we have lost this observation, why we are so preoccupied, why we are so scared as we grow up, why we are so dependent on somebody or another. This is not you or me, this is the human mind. It is not yours or mine, but we think that it is me, it is you. So, is there a role for thinking in daily relationship, in daily living at all? This is such an observable fact. If I am thinking something, my child understands, okay, no point in talking to him because this is how he is. She stops talking to me. It's in our day-to-day relationships. And there is something enormous also in that. If we start living per se, thinking has its place. Listening to people, it has its place. All these words and knowledge has its place. But we are living with words, ideas, thoughts. Is that living at all? I hope I connected to your question.
Yeah, you did. And see, I feel that Krishnamurti was pointing out that we don't know the basic. Like we don't know how to listen. Listen is really an art. And if we really can listen to everything around us, to our kids, but as long as we are so self-centered, interested in our own little things, we cannot listen. It's impossible, even if we want to. So we don't listen to our children because we think they are just children. And I have here a big business. I should pay attention to this instead of playing with the kids and listening to their whatever they are saying. So we have set up some values and we follow these things. And in this, we lost ourselves. We lost our capacity to listen and to live really. To live, this listening, I feel, it is the most important thing in life. To really listen to somebody, to really be interested in other person and in knowing and learning about what that person is trying to convey. But we are so self-centered, we are so enclosed in our own little world. And that is what Krishnamurti is pointing out. As long as you are like this, you cannot listen. Even listen, you cannot. Leave alone all the other things, which is love, compassion, nothing like that will happen because you shut yourself down in this little petty me, and that's where you live. So thank you very much. I really like your...
Actually, when you said that, Krishnamurti said, knowing oneself, what you actually are, what you think, what you feel, knowing yourself is the beginning of freedom. It's such a simple statement. You don't have to go anywhere. You don't have to read anything. It is there for you to see if you want. That is the beauty what he is saying, which I think no teacher in schools, college, or in society is pointing us to. Thank you. Wonderful listening to you.
Yes, Satyananji. Thank you, Murali. Satchidananji has a question. Yeah.
When I say, can I listen to K, when I listen to my child, when I can listen to my spouse, can I see that there's the observer and the observed? I'm back to my conditioning when I say I have to listen to K. K says that I act as the mirror, I'm a mirror. I don't seem to understand that, sir. There's always the observer and the observed. I'm always caught in that. Whether it's K or it's when I say I should listen to my child, listen to the spouse, listen to someone else, listen to the teacher. There's a division, there's a fragmentation. I don't seem to observe that. And that is one of the major factors for you. I can say it's a dissipation of energy or for my suffering or sorrow or whatever it is. Or the conflict which arises from that. Isn't it so, sir?
Yes, I think you're making a point here, Anand. We have made K under teachings. And we have so many books, so many talks, so many question and answers. Fortunately recorded, it is still there. So it is not interpreted versions. But he is saying something very simple. And it is not about him or anything else. It's about me right now. So when he says self-knowing, know yourself, he's saying, please understand this because most of us have never looked at ourselves. You may have looked in the mirror when you were shaving or combing your hair. We have never inwardly looked at ourselves, and that is what we are going to do. This is what he's saying. So whether it is K, whether it is in a conversation right now between Anand and Murali, can we just listen? What are you saying? What are you pointing to? What are you conveying? This is our living. This is what we do all our waking hours. See people, see things, and listen to people. So it is not action at all, an outward action at all. It is not gathering information. It is not categorizing as case teachings. It is living. Living without thoughts inside. And only one can say that, and we have the freedom. Nobody is an authority to tell so-and-so is not living. Biologically, we may be living, but I think we are not living fully, completely. But thank you. Thank you for bringing that again. Yeah.
Thank you, Murali. I think I want to add, if we take Krishnamurti, when we listen to him or when you read him, as a question, as a source from where I start my inquiry and look into my daily living, that is what it means really to inquire, and see what Krishnaji is talking about. But if we accept it as what Krishnaji is saying, then we make him as an authority. And as Murali said, listening is not just listening with the ears. I mean, we have lots of things that, because the thought, our experience, our knowledge always prevents us from listening. Before we hear somebody completely, I'm already ready with judgment or I have questions to ask and so on. So that prevents us listening. But if I care, if I have affection, if I can hold my thoughts and let it be quiet for some time, create that space where listening can happen. So those are the qualities one has to develop by being a little slow in our life, allow things to calm down and all that. Otherwise, there'll be no listening. And the duality which I think Anandji talked about between the observer and the observed will always be there. But even if it is there, can I be aware of that duality? That is where we start, seeing things as they are. Thank you, Murli. It was good. Do you have any more questions? Then, sir, since there are no questions, can we close now?
Yes, sir. Just announce the lectures of the coming year. So because 2 lectures are at 9:30, so if we intimate them right now, it will be better so that person can keep them those in their mind. Because I am afraid, because 2 lectures, 3rd of Kanda Swami and 10th of Professor Krishna, they are on 11 a.m. as usual, but 2 other lectures are from other countries. So they will be starting at 9:30 a.m. So
I'll just briefly, as Jansa wanted me to, we'll be sending you the message and all that. 3rd, we have Mr. Kandaswamy, and 10th January, we have Professor Krishna speaking before this group. On 17th January, Mr. Mark Lee, who is a trustee of the Krishnamurti Foundation India and also Krishnamurti Foundation of America, he'll be speaking on 17th, that is a Sunday, but we'll start at 9:30 because it gets quite late in California by then. So his lecture will be from 9:30 a.m. Similarly, 24th January, we have Mr. David Moody. He was also director of Oak Grove School and has written a number of books on Krishnaji. He'll also be speaking to us on 24th January, but the lecture will start at 9:30 a.m. Otherwise, we'll normally start from 11 because it suits everyone. So it will be a little early for all of us, but seeing their convenience, I think we'll have to bear with it.
Thank you very much, Dubey sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Murli sir.
Thank you, Mr. Murli Menon. Thanks a lot. We'll request you to join us once again. It was a very interesting lecture. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Thank you. All are requested to join in New Year.
Yes.
With Kanda Swami, Professor Krishna, Mark Lee, and Moody. I hope all will present there.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Please close. Kamlesh, please close.